Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you so much to join our show and hear our story from our special guest. And today we are so happy to have Laban. Hello. Hello, Laban.
Hi
How are you
guys.
doing?
Buenos dias.
Yeah.
Buenos dias from Mexico. It's lovely to be with you today. Thank you
Wow.
very much.
You can feel the weather is there still sunny.
Well, this is why I love wearing a nice jacket, to look well presented. But then underneath, I just have my bare chest because it's so beautifully warm and humid here. Probably similar to Vietnam in certain times of the year, I would have thought, with the humidity and the heat. But thank you so much for having me today, and I'm looking forward to sharing.
Our pleasure. Yeah. So to kick off the conversations, and I think it's going to be a great honor for us and audience to maybe yourself to introduce a bit about who you are and what you're doing.
So I am affectionately known as the world's best courage coach. And I teach people how to take bold, massive, and courageous action to facilitate their own miraculous outcomes. And I do that by being a speaker, by being a coach, by being a podcast host, by being an author, by running a mastermind, by being a husband, and by being a man who is endeavoring to be a man of his word and to show up. And the declaration of the world's best courage coach is nothing to do at all with being egotistical. It is simply a declaration that I've decided to make for myself and to simply ask myself, how would the world's best courage coach conduct himself? And really that stemmed from achievement in life, an achievement in conquering drinking and drugs and gambling and philandering and limiting beliefs and incurable autoimmune disease and negative self-talk and a number of other dysfunctions that I acquired as the result of growing up in a less than nurturing environment, which for me was being a child of divorce. And when you go through a healing process like that, you learn a tremendous amount about yourself, and that knowledge that you acquire really makes you a credible resource for people that want help, that are going through or about to go through similar stuff.
Laban, we heard a lot about your stories, and then you wrote a book is internationally well recognized also. So that's why we connect to you and ask you to join the show. And you've been summarized your whole career, your whole life in less than 2 minutes, and it's too fast and too furious for us to get an understanding about that. All right, so let's travel time together. Would you?
Absolutely, yeah. I love Back to the
Okay.
Future. It's one of my favorite movies.
Alrighty. So when I was young, I wanted to become an astronaut. When Vivian was young, she wanted to become a famous singer. Neither of us had, had anything to do near to what we wanted to become, right? And so we wanted to know that, Levin, when you were young, what was your dream?
For as long as I could remember when I was a kid, even until I was 16 years old, was desperate to follow my father's footsteps and become a world famous radio announcer, a broadcaster. My father was a wonderful broadcaster and had the most extraordinary voice and had a real natural talent for it that he developed. And when I was 16, I filled out all the documentation to go to Polytech, which is like a community college kind of thing, which is the only place that you could study radio back then. And my father, in all his wisdom, said, "Son, there's no money in radio. Go and find something else to do." And so I spent the next 20 years doing jobs that I absolutely hated until I've ended up going full circle. And although I'm not technically on a radio station, I'm now involved with 2 podcasts, one of which is my own called Become Your Own Superhero, and another one that I'm a co-host with 3 other people called the Ultimate Coach Podcast. So isn't it funny how things come full circle in life?
I know it's funny. Yeah, it's like sometimes like the dots can only be connected backward, like Steve Jobs famously said, right? So, but We want to know because you had a very rough childhood that lead to a lot of dysfunctions and things in your life. Laban, would you tell us those stories?
So look, absolutely. And one thing I would preface before I share any of this is that when you are listening to anyone share their story of dysfunction or abuse, it's really, really important never ever to compare your own experience to anyone else's. And Dr. Jordan Peterson says that we should only compare ourselves to the person we were the day before, because the significance of what I went through, which I touched on, was simply being a child of divorce, right? My parents split up when I was 3.5. There was custody battles. There was, children being snatched away from each parent, and the police being involved and dropped off at foster homes, and a lot of leverage that the children were used for. And the reality of the situation is, Vivian and Hara, is that I grew up not knowing how to be a functional human being in lots of areas of my life, and relationships and sex and addiction and, impulse management and that type of thing. And that was simply because I had parents that were ill-equipped to esteem themselves, let alone teach that to their children. So they were doing the best they could with the tools they had available, but it wasn't enough. And so despite the dysfunction, I'm incredibly appreciative and grateful for the experiences that I've had, because it's allowed me to grow into the man that I am today. And that is someone who has broken what they call the cycle of intergenerational trauma in lots of areas of my family, and am now resetting what's going to happen for future generations.
Wow. Laban, a lot of people, when they got into those that's challenges, we got sunk in under the water, right? But you were able to find out and have the courage inside of you to swim up the water and get out of that and get out of that really really well, so that you can teach people how through your stories to transform that the way that they live also. Tell us what happened at that moment that you decide to change.
I bounced along the floor of rock bottom a few times before I sort of finally ground to a halt. And I know a lot of people will identify with this. Sometimes the universe takes a few slaps across the face to make us wake up and realize that, maybe it is time to make a change. And I found myself in 2015 on a school night. I had work the next day. It was like midnight. I had about 3 bottles of red wine coursing its way through my veins and smashing into my fatty liver. And I was gambling on a horse race in Hong Kong with money that I shouldn't have been spending. And I realized in that moment, in my moment of degeneracy, where I was not even watching the horse race, I was simply refreshing the browser just to see whether I had won. And I realized fundamentally something wasn't right with the direction of my life. And in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen was a phone number that I had never, ever seen before, although I'd been on that webpage hundreds of times. And it was the number for the Gamblers Helpline. And I called the number immediately without any thought. And this amazing woman picked up the phone, whose last name I'll never know, but she will always be Mary Magdalene to me. Her first name was Mary, because she was my guardian angel, whether she realized it or not. And she was the first person to listen to me without judgment. And it's a very powerful experience for people that have gone through whatever you've gone through. Find someone that can listen to you without judgment. It might be a counselor. It might be, someone in the church, someone that will genuinely listen to you without judgment. And that experience really endeared me to this woman. She shared with me how high the rates of suicide were for gamblers. And it's way faster than drinking and drugs and some of the other dysfunctions, because of how quickly you lose everything, right? And that put the fear of God into me, and I got put in touch with a gambling psychologist run. And I had access to this amazing woman for 1.5 years for free, paid for by the the taxes from gambling losses. So for the first time in my gambling life, I was actually up. And she spoke to me about coping mechanisms and codependent behavior and escapism behavior. And I started to become insatiably thirsty with wanting to understand what I had gone through so that I could heal it. I think I might have been an engineer in a previous life because I was able to reverse engineer what had gone down. And then once you understand how things work, at least in my experience, it allowed me to do the healing and to fix a lot of the stuff. And so here I am. I just celebrated 6 years of sobriety in August of 2022, and this is being recorded in November 2022. Longer for drugs, longer for gambling, longer for philandering and limiting beliefs and negative self-talk, and here we are.
Wow. A year and a half with a therapist.
Once a week for the first year, and then every 2 weeks or so. And to be honest, I could have got away with less time. I don't think you need that much time, but I didn't have anyone in my life that I was able to be honest with. You know, I spent an entire life as an adult seeking approval from people, trying to be liked. And we all know someone who does this, or you might even do it yourself, you know, like seeking approval and validation from people that it doesn't even matter. And when you come from that background, it's really hard to admit I need help. It's really hard to admit you've got faults, you know. But I realized very quickly that until I took ownership of my demons, nothing was going to change. And there's a great quote from the motivational speaker Les Brown, who actually wrote the foreword for my book. He says, "Ask for help, not so that you appear weak, but so that you can remain strong, and keep asking for help until you get it."
Wow. Laban, as a person grow from challenging situation, a lot of times you go through challenging alone by yourself without anybody next to you. Hearing that, right? So being open and ask for help was not a normal thing that happened in your life. So how could you, come up with, that needs and, start speaking, I need help sentence to somebody? To that Lady Mary.
It's a great question, Hara, and here's my answer to it, right? To the best of my knowledge. I was in so much pain, emotional, spiritually, probably physically at times, where I was like, the thought of asking for help was a better alternative than remaining in the state that I was in. And pain is a very strong motivator, all right? Pain is a very strong motivator. And so I had no choice, at least in my own mind, that I needed to sort this out. I knew I was going to end up dead. I knew the trajectory of my life in my mid-30s was the opposite of how I imagined my life as a young man, when I was a wide-eyed 16-year-old with aspirations of being a famous radio announcer, and having that dashed by my father, who was just doing the best he could with the tools he had available, you know. And it's just, I had to go through this whole experience in order for me to end up doing what I'm doing now. And so the people in your life, if you ask for help and they judge you for it, they are not the people you need or want in your life. And Jim Rohn talks famously about us becoming the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time around. You know what I mean? You become like the books that you read and the people you spend the time with. So look at who you're spending your time with. Are these people that are going to lift you up? Are these people that are going to support you and empower you? And more often than not, if your life's heading down off a cliff, those people will not be serving you well. They will be other people that are stuck in victim mindsets. And it's not that they're bad people. They're not going to serve you well at all. If any of you are to get out of this, you need to make tough decisions. And I would say, guys, that over the course of the last 5-6 years, especially in the last 2 years, I have lost, for lack of a better phrase, 99% of my former circle of friends. And it's not because they are bad people. It's that we've got nothing in common anymore. Nothing in common. When you give up alcohol and you're hanging around a bunch of drunks, they don't like that very much, because it reminds them of their own mortality. It reminds them of their own, weakness. And people don't like that until they're ready.
Mm. Wow. So for that 1.5 year of transformation, one section per week, right? And then how do you see the progress of change inside of you?
It was very gradual to begin with, but I must admit, after the first session, the psychologist, her name was Lee, spoke about the relationship that I had with my mother. And my mum and I had a very, very dysfunctional relationship. We would go for a year without speaking to each other, and she didn't live, she lived in New Zealand. I was in Australia, so she wasn't that far away. But I really, really didn't like my mum. And she spoke to me about the relationship with my mum, and I broke down in that first session. I remember bawling my eyes out at this huge emotional release. So there was a profound moment at the beginning, and then you would go through this non-linear healing journey. You'd have major progress, and then you'd, do something incredibly stupid. And for anyone that hasn't read the book, I've got a copy handy here. Here's the cover here. It's called Bet on You, and it details a lot of the stories that we're talking about here today in a far more entertaining way than I'm able to deliver in a short time together today, right? But you do these amazing amounts of improvement, and then you'd fall off the wagon. And you're like, oh God, like I'm in my late 30s, like life should be better than this. And then all of a sudden you have these major breakthroughs, and then, you meet the person of your dreams who thinks you are the cat's pajamas, and all of a sudden people are asking you for advice, and some of those friends are starting to circle back and knock on the door and just say, hey, I'm really proud of what you're doing. Have you got any advice? Or so it's a challenging journey, but it's a journey that I would never do it any other way.
Wow. Earlier you said that your last life you were an engineer because you were able to reverse engineer and everything to the transformation. You tell us what was that reverse engineer, actually was back then though.
Yeah. So repeat the question, huh?
Because earlier you said that you were, like your last life, it looked like you were an engineer back then, right? And then because you were able to reverse engineer the whole process so that, you can help yourself to change and have the change sticks, right? So tell us, what did you do in that engineering process though?
Experience, right? If you want to learn how to become an Olympic 100-meter sprinter, how do you think you would learn how to do that?
Practice it.
Right? Well, practice is a part of it, but in order to do it the fastest way, you want to hang around Usain Bolt, right? You want to hang around Linford Christie. You want to hang around Ben Johnson, and maybe not all the guys that are doing the steroids, but you get what I mean? Like you want to be around people that are already doing it, have already done it. And when you are starting out in this healing journey, the only way to do that, unless you are blessed enough to be in a community where you've got access to these people, is to read books. And I don't know what the number is now, but in the last 4.5, 5 years, it's over 650 books. Like I have, and they're like fundamentally non-fiction self-help books, apart from the odd modern day parable books like The Go-Giver, which are written, in a fiction style. So I became incredibly mentally thirsty for reading. I got my health sorted and my cognitive function improved, and I became able to just absorb. And, when I created the podcast, a lot of the guests that I would interview had their own books. A lot of them are best-selling authors, and I would, as a sign of respect for the host or the guest, I would interview them and have read their book. And I was consuming 3 books a week during the lockdown. I'm talking 5 or 6 hour reads per book, some cases more, some cases less. And what happens is you don't remember everything, but when you start doing that, you start getting a good idea for what works, because the laws of the universe don't really shift. And that for me really, and Vivian, was just the most powerful thing, because I wasn't relying on anyone for help at that point, in order to start this, to understand it. And then you'd try one thing and it might not work, and you try one other thing and then that would work, and you'd start developing really great levels of intuition. And then once your intuition's dialed in, then you'd know that you're on the path. And how people would engage and treat you also was a really good indicator of the success that you were or were not having.
Beautiful, beautiful. Tell us, how did you end up in writing your own book, Bet on You?
So this is easily one of my favorite stories to tell. And you'll know why when I finish telling it. So we were in Melbourne, Australia during the lockdown, and that was really when lockdown kicked in. That was when I was sort of forced into this entrepreneurial journey. I'd kind of planned to start at the end of 2020, early 2021. And I had no choice, but because we're in lockdown, but to create a podcast because I wanted to get my message out to the world, right? Well, 10 episodes in, when I had less than 10 subscribers, I got the phone number for Les Brown, who I mentioned. For those who don't know, Les Brown is easily one of the greatest motivational speakers of all time, living or dead. And I rang him up and he picked up the phone and he said, "Hi, Les speaking," in that big, beautiful voice. And I said, "Les Brown?" He said, "Yes, it is." I said, "Les, it's Laban here from Melbourne, Australia." He said, "Well, hi, Laban. How can I help?" I said, "Les, I'm a huge fan of you and your work, and I'm the host of an amazing podcast series called Become Your Own Superhero. And I'd be honored if you came on and shared your amazing story with our audience. When are you available?" I said. He said, "Well, when are you thinking, boy?" And I said, "To be honest, Les, whenever suits you probably works with me," right? To give you some context, this guy charges $70,000 an hour for a keynote, right? That's a reasonable price. It's not the most you'd ever pay. So he came on at midnight 4 days later. He jumped on the call, and I recorded all this because it was done through Zoom, right? And I asked him a question at the beginning. I said, "Hey, Les, what do you think of the name of the podcast?" And this is before we even started recording. He said, "Laban, become your own superhero." And then he went on to absolutely floor me with how powerful this breakdown of what he thought become your own superhero meant to him. And it was the most humbling, exciting, amazing description that you could only ever dream about, right?
Wow.
And I was so moved by the way he responded that I just verbally diarrheaed the story of transformation to him, talking about the drinking, the drugs, and the sex, and the autoimmune disease, and all this other stuff. And something that I said in that resonated with him in a way that I'll never understand. But he just listened. And Steve Hardison, known as the ultimate coach, says the power is in the listener. If you ever spend time with really charismatic people like Les Brown, you'll understand what I mean. Like, they just are with you 100% committed and present. And he just listened and he said, "Congratulations, Laban." I said, "Thanks, Les." He goes, "Do you have a book?" And I went, "No, I don't." Now, I never finished high school. I never went to college. I never wrote anything of any significance, right? He said, "If you're going to be a speaker, you need a book for credibility." And I went, "Okay." He goes, "Now tell me, who was the most influential person in your life when you were 5? I thought about this question for the first time in my life. And I realized that despite her many, 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 many flaws, it'd be my mum that I had this horribly dysfunctional relationship with. But I was forced to think about the positive that I got from my mum. And it was a wonderful thought experiment. I realized something, that my mum was unbelievably loving, unconditionally loving, and she was tenacious, and she was spiritual and fearless." And he's writing all these things down. Vivian, he looks up at me and he says, "Laban, this is a God moment." He said, "I'm going to show you how to monetize your purpose." And for the next 10 minutes, he reads back to me the blueprint for this book he wants me to write, called Bet on You. He said,
Wow.
"You're going to write the book, Laban. You're going to turn the book into a keynote. You're going to turn the keynote into a 3-day retreat. And even if you muck this up, you're going to make 200 grand in the next year. And I'm going to interview you on my social media channel with 4 million followers. And I'm going to write the foreword to your book."
Wow.
And in a moment of complete insanity, this was mid-May 2020, I said, "Les, if you're going to write the foreword to my book, I'll have it to you by June 30, 2020. And in 6 weeks, in the harshest lockdowns of anywhere in the world, I pumped out 30,000 words of bet on you and completely transformed my life in the process, delivered it on his inbox, and the rest, they say, is history.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Laban, thanks a lot for sharing this story. Years ago, you didn't know how to ask for help, right? And then when you realize the need for changing, you asked for help. Then you take the asking to the next level by approaching Les Brown. He's also my, like one of the most favorite person on earth that I have on my list also. And you asked him to join your show while you had nothing. And then, so what courage did you give yourself back then, Levin, to, ring Les and ask him to join your show for free?
I I don't know what it was specifically, but what I do know is that in 2019, I had an attempt at running my recruitment business. I worked in IT recruitment for 13 years, and I worked for someone. And then in 2019, I went out on my own. 2019 was a total unmitigated disaster, right? And I used to use that for effect only. But what it forced me to do at the time was to cold call CIOs and CEOs of companies to try and get business. And so I developed a resilience to cold calling people that were previously unattainable. And Les Brown, it wasn't the only big name that I called. I had conversations with Brene Brown prior to that. I since have spoken to hundreds of some of the most high-profile people on the planet, members of royalty, politicians, people that you would know, and many of them have come on the podcast. And it's one of those things where that experience with Les taught me about the significance of going into every single interaction that I have with anyone, thinking, what value can I add this person's life? What value can I add the person's life at the supermarket or at the shop or the IT support guy 3,000 miles away? And when you operate from a place of service like that, you cannot fail, because as I've come to learn, people like Les Brown need help too. All right. And the more that you get good at receiving help, the more help you can give them. And to follow on from that story, Les Brown, anyone that knows about him, has been through 2 lots of prostate cancer. He had stage 4 prostate cancer twice. He's in his late 70s now. I was then able to introduce him to some really brilliant medical experts that have the specific experience in treating what he was working with health-wise. So I was able to not pay the favor back, but I was able to, add value to his life. And now Les is in this mastermind group that we created called World's Best. He shows up when we have these meetings once a month. We've got the world's greatest motivational speaker coming and asking for help, and I've seen this with lots of people that you would know, Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen and John Gray and a number of high-profile people. They all need help. If you can figure out what it is that you can add value in their life, right, it makes you a very, very powerful resource, because so many people operate from a place of selfishness. It's like, what can I get from this person, right? What can I get? What can I get? And all the people at the top that have wonderful careers, wonderful relationships with family and spouses, wonderful financial success, they all operate from a place of service. And I'm not talking about being walked all over and just giving everything away for free, because people won't, the more you pay, the more you pay attention. But if you operate from what value can I add this person's life, you will never want for anything.
Wow. With that being said, Laban, what values can we add to your life?
What value? What do I need help with? Is that the question you're asking?
Yes.
So, well, I wasn't expecting this, but here's one thing before I answer this. It's really important that you are able to, when asked a question like this, to be able to receive it, because by me saying, no, I'm good, I don't allow you guys to be able to give. All right. So my ask is simply this, right? Now I don't know
Yes.
enough about you guys to know what kind of impact, but this book is a divine download from a being far greater than I, right? Now I'm not religious in any capacity, but I'm a very spiritual guy. This book is designed for me 5 years before I hit rock bottom. So it's really, designed to be targeted towards men in their early 30s, maybe late 20s. Women get a lot of benefit too, because there's a lot of information on how to identify a lot of those behaviors as well. So as women, you can avoid dating men like I was when I was in that state. And my ask is to share this with people that you think will benefit from getting access to a book like that. That's why I wrote it. And books inherently, unless you have a large platform, which mine's sort of growing organically, that you need help in getting that book out into the world. So that's my ask, and sharing this message with people that need it.
Thanks a lot, and that is definitely something that we can always do, to share that, not just because is it the needs that you ask from us, but it's also the needs that people need to have that kind of information, because life will hit us some way, somewhat, right? And then like at a certain stage, people will reach the rock bottom also, so they need to get up. They need to find a way to get up. You have the live example right there, your live example, and then those been written down for people to learn and then to apply. So definitely we share that. All right.
I appreciate that, guys. Appreciate it.
And then hopefully that one day we'll be able to talk to the publishers in Vietnam. What if they could partner with you to translate the book into Vietnamese, and have that, and access to this market also. There's a lot of people in this market who also needed the transformation in somewhat, right?
Do you know what? It's really interesting you say that. I recorded the audiobook when I was in Germany last year, and I saw the significance of books being translated. I've got a number of mentors, and one of my mentors is a guy called Andrew Matthews, who wrote a number of books called like Being Happy, and they are really designed to be read from an 8-year-old level up. And a lot of people read them as their first ever book in English, but they're in about 70 different languages. He sold about 8 million copies of these books, and he spoke to me about the significance of getting them translated. So when I was in Germany, I managed to go to the Frankfurt Book Messe, which for any publishers or for any authors that are listening to this or aspiring authors, that is the place that you go in the world to connect with people that can help getting the book translated into different languages, if that helps. So yeah, I'd love to get it. I don't know how many people speak. What's the main language in Vietnam? Is it just called Vietnamese?
Yeah, Vietnamese.
How many people in Vietnam?
100 million.
So it's 100 million people that could benefit from that. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, let's work on that. All right, Laban. We know the challenge you went through when you were young. We know the journey that of transformation, and the beautiful part of you ran Les Brown and then asked him to join. That lead to the whole beautiful thing of him do the forwards for your book, right? And then share with you the ideas so that you complete that book. That's how beautiful the world is. Yeah, if we can tap into the right kind of person with the right kind of intentions, and ask the right kind of questions also, maybe at the odd times. Levin. So the question for you, we want to go into a little into the future. All right, is there anything that exciting you are working on and you want to share with Vivian and myself and the audience so that we can celebrate with you and Anna in advance?
Yeah, the number one priority for my wife and I is to make a baby. And for anyone that knows any of our story, my wife, like I'm known as the world's best courage coach, right? But she is the most courageous person I know. And my wife and I collectively have gone through 16 consecutive miscarriages. And we're getting to the bottom, the root cause of it now. But I'm 42. I still feel very young, buckets of energy, but I want to create a dynasty with family. And for us to overcome that challenge will make the most wonderful story, because it's a subject that's very taboo. A lot of people don't like talking about it. And, you know, my wife, she's got a podcast called the World's Best Trauma Recovery Podcast, right? And her situation, she grew up in Russia, and from the age of 15 until she was 21, experienced systemic sexual abuse from a stepfather. And there was 2 pregnancies as a result of the abuse and 2 forced illegal abortions, one of which damaged the uterine wall, which has been the cause for all these miscarriages. Otherwise, she's a perfectly healthy woman. And so her message is to be a voice for women that haven't been able to speak up. So her and I are teaming up. We're becoming the ultimate power couple. You know what I mean? Like, I'm so blessed to have someone in my life that's interested in personal development. She's so brilliant. And, you know, watching her and her journey and her healing has just been so inspiring. So that's making the babies priority number 1, really getting the message out. When you start out as an entrepreneur, as a speaker and an author and a coach, it's like you only hear about the people that are like the overnight success that took them 10 years, you know, that took them 20 years. You know, Joe Dispenza and, you know, some of these other names that I mentioned, like a lot of them worked for many, many years before they became household names. And so we're in that process now of building up the momentum and getting this out to people that are looking for this. There's nothing worse than trying to offer help to people that do not want help. And so we want to create an organic, magnetic attraction for people that are seeking this help out. And so that's the journey. So my wife's writing a book at the moment, which will be out in 2023. I've started my next book, which I'm not putting a release date on it just yet. It'll be out more than likely next year, but I want to make sure that it's going to have the message that I want to get out. And, you know, we're based in Mexico, so we'll be doing some traveling, heading to India in February, and then back to the United States for some speaking engagements in 2023. So that's kind of what's going on.
Wow. And we wish all of your goals, your wishes to come true. All right, Laban. So having your baby and then having the empire of of your family also together, and continue with spreading the words out. Continue to share that inspiration things that you and your wife are doing. I hope that one day we'll be able to invite Anna to the show and have her share her stories also. So that would be wonderful for a lot of female listeners in our show also, and the people around the world also. Laban, could you transfer that message to her?
Yeah, absolutely. She'd love to share her message. She went back to Russia last year to testify against the perpetrator, which, you know, it was 20 years. And because of the statute of limitations and just the lack of evidence, he got off. But she was interviewed by one of the largest magazines in Russia in that area, and it went crazy viral. And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women reached out to Anna and asking for help as well. So this message, you know, and culturally, I know like Southeast Asian cultures typically don't like talking about these things much either. I'm only basing it off my time when I was in Thailand. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's such a taboo subject. But if the men knew that they were going to get caught at some point, I think the amount of abuse would drop off massively. And it all ties in with all of this stuff. So she's an extraordinary, inspiring woman. So appreciate that, guys.
Absolutely. I'll send you an email and asking you to connect us to Anna. All right, Laban. Laban, you were frozen for like about 20 seconds. So I didn't hear anything from you. I didn't see anything.
No,
Can you
I
hear?
just said I can hear. I can see you guys perfectly. No, I just
Yeah.
said thank you. Yeah, I heard about introducing Anna. That'd be great. So we'll make that happen.
Okay. I have one last question for you, Laban.
Sure.
And the question is about thinking, because my wife and I, we've been on the quest to find out how experts are thinking, how amazing people think. All right. And um, uh, and if we can share those secrets to people, to those who are listening to our shows, so that they can reflect, they can learn, and they can apply their ways, then they can improve their ability to think, and that is start the whole change process in the positive way. So the question that we want to have for you, Laban, is how have you been growing your ability to think these years?
How have I been growing my ability to think over these years?
Yep.
I've never been asked that question like that before. It's a great one. It's a really great question. You know, one thing I would say, something that I'm getting a lot better at, is taking the time to put myself in the position of the other person before I respond, right? And not telegraphing my own experience onto the person without giving it due thought. And because we do this instinctively in nature, right? We see someone walking along a tightrope, and we might say, "Oh, that's so dangerous," not knowing that the person's dedicated their entire life to learning how to walk a tightrope, And maybe that's not the greatest example, but putting myself in the shoes of other people and realizing that when people are attacking me, if people are deliberately going out of their way to attack me, it's a reflection of their own inner turmoil. So it's nothing to do with me. And the more that I work on that, I understand and comprehend where people are coming from. It gives me a greater sense of empathy and understanding. And you've got to meet people where they're at. And this takes a lot of practice, because it's easy to experience rejection, especially, like I mentioned before, coming from a lifetime of seeking validation and people pleasing, and realizing that it's nothing to do with me. And another great quote from Les Brown, he says, "What people think of me is none of my business." Right? What people think of me is none of my business. And it's true. It's true. Like, and you think about it, if you ever tell someone your troubles, like 90% of the time they're thinking, "I don't care," right? And the other 10% are like, "I'm glad it's happening to you." it's like, so are you going to wallow in victim? Like, no one cares. No one cares that you were a child of divorce. No one cares that you were abused. No one cares that you were beaten up, right? Yeah, it's sad, but it's like, what are you going to do about it? And victimhood is a place that is so unattractive to people that want to do good with their life. So I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but you can kind of see, take time to think about your response. Sleep on any response. If someone says something to you that really makes you upset and angry, before you even dare respond, sleep on it. Sleep on it. I guarantee you'll respond completely differently. You don't have to have them in your life, but sleep on it, and your response will be a far more grown-up one.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks a lot. Thanks for re-emphasizing the importance of that space between what information we receive and how we respond to it. So that space, definitely, if you can give time to it, we're gonna respond in a lot better ways and more thoughtful, more mindful also. And sometimes not respond is also the best ways to respond also, right, Levin?
That's it.
All right, my friend. Thanks a lot for spending your morning with Vivi and me and the audience of the show. We really appreciate that. And you guys have magnificent. And please continue to spread the message out to as many people as you could, because out there are a lot of us out there that needing this kind of help from you and from Anna. So please continue doing that. All right.
Thank you guys so much. And if you're listening to this and you haven't subscribed and you haven't left a review, stop watching now and get on and leave a review and share this with someone that you really care about, right? The 400 and how many episodes you guys done?
478. Yes.
400 and like I've done 175 podcasts and it's 2.5 years of solid work, right? So these guys are doing more than double. Support this. We need more voices like this out in the world. That's my encouragement.
Thank you very much, Laban. Very nice of you. Very kind of you. All right. And then enjoy the trip to India. Enjoy the trip to India. And the next time, put Vietnam to the list. You have new friends here waiting. All right. Bye, my friends.
Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.